Thank you. And can you make a few more co-hosts for me to help me out? All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is July 17th, and it's our regular Movement for People's Democracy meeting. This time we have a speaker, which we're delighted that he was able to join us. And we have the regular rules and regulations as far as our interfacing with our guests. Raise your hand. If there's problems, we can mute or put anybody in the waiting room. Just do the regular as we do with our classes and our schools. Okay, Movement for People's Democracy came into being in 2018. The purpose, it's a national organization, which all of us are members of, we have to remember that, which seeks to combat imperialism, fascism, and capitalism while promoting democracy and workers' rights through organizing protests, demonstrations, events, and engaging in electoral politics when appropriate. The MPD is committed to building a new true democracy and building a society where domestic policies are not only sound but just, and where the world at large is treated with more respect and dignity. We focus on four areas, and I'll just make them very short. Ending American imperialism, ending the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, ensuring equality, the right to organize in one's workplace, and the right to housing and a living wage. Responding to climate change, the first thing we need to do is become more international in the outreach so that we all can have a coordinated plan. And assisting local communities. Many of our MPD chapters assist the local needs of the homeless. They fight for tenants' rights, and they also find out, going into communities, what communities need, and they try to support them. It could be educational, it could be safety. So this is what we are all about. And in addition to that, in October of 2022, we will hold our first MPD Congress. And so that's also very exciting for us, and we're working towards that now. So it's with my pleasure to introduce Mr. Geoff Young. He won the primary, the Democratic primary in Kentucky, and he will be in the campaign this November with the mid-elections. And to help us out is going to be Alex Booth. He's going to facilitate. I think Jeffrey would probably want to speak a few minutes first, but then Alex can take over. Would you like to speak first? Yeah.
That would be fine. Just a few words of introduction. Thank you. My name is Geoff Young. I'm the Democratic nominee in Kentucky's 6th Congressional District. And unlike Andy Barr, my Republican opponent, I will never vote to send weapons to Nazis. That's my main slogan during the primary. You may have helped me win it. I've been inspired in my life by the autobiography of Gandhi when I was pretty young. The way he organized a tremendous number of people for nonviolent action. I grew up in a middle-class town in Massachusetts in a Jewish family. In my junior year in high school, I read a couple books on the war in Vietnam by Noam Chomsky. That radicalized me. I wanted to go to MIT partly to take 1 or 2 political science classes with him. And I did get in and took 2 classes in 1976. The first one was on US foreign policy since the end of since World War II, actually the middle of the war. That was a life-changing experience. And I became committed to fight against the empire, to stop Western imperialism. And part-time, I've been a member of the anti-war movement ever since, the last 45 years or so. Moved to Kentucky in 1982, worked at the state government in Frankfurt, the capital, in the Energy and Environment Cabinet. I was in the State Energy Office, assistant director, and worked on improving energy efficiency in all sectors of the Kentucky economy. I didn't think I would ever run for office. Maybe about 12 years ago, I thought I would run against a far right-wing Christian Republican in the Lexington, in the Kentucky House of Representatives. Learned a little bit. I ran as a Green. As a Green from 2009 to 2013. Didn't win, but learned some things. And then I've run against my current opponent, Andy Barr, in 2014, 16, 18, 2020 as a Republican, and 2022 as a Democrat again. My lifelong party, but I almost always vote for president, third party. I think the only time I ever voted for a Republican or Democrat for president was 2008, when it was Barack Obama or Sarah Palin and John McCain. I kind of panicked and voted for Obama, but not in 2012. My goal is to make the Democratic Party into a peace party again, like it was to some extent in the 60s and early 70s. If that doesn't happen, we're going to have two war parties or one war party with two right wings, and America will not be able to make it through the next decade or two.
Thank you. I'm sure, see, we're starting to get hands already. Well, let's start with Alex first, and keep your hand up, Xavier. Oh, yep, here they come. It's up to you, Alex, if you wanted to first speak to Geoff, or if you just want to go right into getting some questions from the folks here.
Well, considering how enthusiastic some of these folks are, I think we'll take some of their questions first. We'll start with Tyler from New York.
Xavier was before me, so I'll let him go before me.
Okay, Xavier, Oregon, you're up.
All right. Thank you, comrade. So I'm really glad to hear about the whole "don't send weapons to Nazis" position. I gotta say, I'm in support of not arming Nazis. I'm glad to hear that you have a adequate concern of international fascism. But what my question is what is your plan for addressing domestic fascism and the rising fascist threat here within America?
Oh, good question. Okay, well, on June 24th of this year, we had the worst Supreme Court decision in my lifetime. The overturning Roe versus Wade decision in 1973. 6 woman-hating, crooked, constitution-shredding so-called justices voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. A couple of days after it was announced, I read the whole decision. The majority decision and all of the six concurring opinions, well, there were fewer than six, but all the concurring opinions were horribly written, completely arbitrary, not based in the Constitution, not based in precedent, and highly discriminatory against every woman in America and most of the men. So my first plan or project to stop and reverse fascism in America is to demand the impeachment of all six partisan hacks who voted to overturn Roe v. Wade. Impeach them. We will have 3 Supreme Court justices for a while. That's fine. It's not a problem. The dissent by 3 justices was beautiful, extremely well written, found well based in the Constitution and US history and the facts of the abortion issue. The fact that without Roe v. Wade, more women will die in illegal back alley abortions, and the abortion rate will not go down. That's been proven over the years by studies by the Guttmacher Institute. So that's step 1 to address domestic fascism.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we have everyone else that wants to talk to you too. So go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, so yeah, I actually first heard about you on, I was watching Multipolarist with Ben Norton. That's one of my go-to anti-imperialist news sources. But my question for you is, it's pretty huge for a non-neoliberal Democrat to win a primary. I'm just curious, how did you get all this support? Like, what did you do? Was it based on the conditions that really pushed you into office, or into
No.
this win?
Okay, so I ran for the first time for the US House in the Democratic primary in 2014. And I learned that, well, I had one opponent. Both of us were unknown. And the entire state Democratic Party structure rigged it. They devoted in-kind resources. So one example, early in the campaign, the governor of Kentucky, the father of the current governor, so the father's name is Steve Beshear, Democrat, he endorsed my primary opponent, sent out a robocall, and I was one of the people who got called. Yeah, she's great, vote for her. I don't know about every state, but in Kentucky, that's illegal. We have a statute that says that neither the Republican nor the Democratic Party is allowed to, the party structure, the leaders of it are not allowed to put their fingers on the scale of the voters and make the decision for them. So I sued them. I sued them in 2015. And they really didn't like being sued. And this happened again and again. Happened in 2016, 2018. I'm not a lawyer, but all my lawsuits were strong, meritorious. All of them were thrown out before discovery, which showed me something else, that our judges in Kentucky. If there are any honest Kentucky judges, I don't know who they are. Never met one. So, and the Kentucky Court of Appeals is a cesspool of corruption. They just throw out cases. And that violates the civil rules. They throw out cases for no reason. And the Kentucky Supreme Court is a somewhat smaller cesspool of corruption.
But
So they basically, the answer to your question is I wore them out. In 2022, they couldn't find a wealthy, famous Democrat to run against me. And because they had lost so many times, they figured, well, we're not going to beat Andy Barr. So I did have an opponent, complete newcomer, unknown, and I won by 52 to 48%, pretty close. But I wore them out. They finally gave up on trying to stop me.
wonderful, wonderful.
Excellent. We'll go to Cameron, Oregon next. Go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, my question was going to be in the last few years, in the last couple presidential administrations, we've seen the U.S.-Cuba relations kind of brought up, but then brought to the wayside and not talked about. And I'm wondering, like, how you, if you are elected, will approach U.S.-Cuba relations.
Well, I will introduce legislation to eliminate all of our sanctions against all countries, including Cuba, and all individuals, because all of our sanctions are illegal. The UN Security Council is the only body that has the legal authority to blockade a country, sanction it, stop its trade. All these things are acts of war. And so all of our sanctions are illegal. All of them, well, the world is getting good at defeating our sanctions, especially since Russia and China came along. All of our sanctions against Russia have backfired against us. They are the main cause of inflation, rising gas prices, shortages, and Washington, just in general, seems not to have realized that and keeps doubling down, adding more sanctions, and it's going to destroy the economy. We're going to enter a second Great Depression because of these stupid sanctions and the fact that the world has figured out how to defeat them.
Absolutely. Excellent. We'll move to Angelo. Angelo, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Well, I'm 70, going to be 76, and I haven't met a candidate like you. I live in New York, and I haven't met a candidate like you in my lifetime. The closest was George McGovern, and that's way back in 72, I think that was.
That's right.
And that's the closest. And then I was involved with Gene McCarthy in the Democratic Party against the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
But by and large, the so-called progressive camp in the Democratic Party has been very mute. I'd like to know how progressives in the party, Bernie Sanders, have they responded to you at all? And if so, in what way? And how did my second question, how did the National Democratic Party treat your campaign? I think you alluded to it before, partially. And you have courage to run against the reactionary Barr candidates. It's amazing. As I said, you really belong in New York. You belong someplace in Chelsea, in Manhattan, to run against the people there. But you are way, way years ahead of everybody I've seen in my lifetime. It wasn't until I came across Henry Wallace. I was born in 47, so I couldn't vote in 48. But in Henry Wallace's candidacy in the Progressive Party, you would have fit perfectly. And I don't see how you're existing now. And I'm warning you, as an old person, don't give up. It's easy to give up. It's so easy to give up. But don't. We need you. The American people need you like we need oxygen. We need people like you. That's my question. Thank you.
So I guess the question in there was, how did I survive? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just persistence. I've never been wealthy. I've never been any good at raising money. So since 2012, when I ran for the Kentucky House, all of my campaigns until this one have been largely self-financed. And in this one, I'm working with a really good fundraising director and team. I'm going to be spending a whole lot of time on the phone. Why I don't give up? Well, I mean, all right, Caitlin Johnstone gave me an answer about 5 years ago, blogger from Australia. She's wonderful, and check her out if you haven't heard of her. Early on in her blogging career, let's say 4 years ago, she wrote a blog post with a picture of a nuclear explosion in the distance, and asked the question, if you see this in the distance someday, ask yourself, or you might ask yourself, did I do everything I could to stop that from happening, to prevent it? And that question really got to my heart. And that's my motive. That's why I'm running for office for the US House, to do what I can to prevent a nuclear war. And I've deduced or concluded, I've concluded that it won't be started by Russia. It won't be started by China. Be started by the United States or possibly Israel.
Mhm. Thank you. We're going to have to limit the questions and the answers to about 2 minutes each, because we're running out of time already at 7:27, so we can get everybody in.
Is there a
Okay.
time limit for the whole meeting, or?
Well, there is another meeting after this
Ah.
at 8:30. Yeah.
Okay,
So, all right, go ahead, Alex.
Okay, we're going to move on to Michael, Kentucky. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, Jeff.
hi.
My question would be, when it comes down to party politics, you've ran many different directions, many different fields, trying to get on the ballot, which I respect. You've gotten on the ballot. How do you view efforts of infiltration? Do you think it's worth to try and run as a Republican, to try and run as a Democrat? Do you think that their effort should be put in one way or another? Because I'd say when it comes to anti-imperialism, the Republicans have, I think, as big of a faction as the Democrats, if not bigger. And institutionally, I think they've done less to limit prominent people than the Democrats have. If you look at, for example, primaries like the Democrat primaries, I don't think it's been as bad with Republicans. How do you view that?
Okay, I can answer that question from personal experience. 2020, I ran as a Republican in the primary against Andy Barr. They rigged it in precisely the same ways that the KDP rigged their primary, precisely the same way. There's no imagination. It's always the same method. Don't let the challenger speak at any events while you have the incumbent or the favorite giving the keynote speech. Don't donate any money. Don't help the challenger get any money. Exactly the same. So both dominant parties are totally hostile to people who try to infiltrate, 100% hostile. That being said, I think that the only way to save America is to change the direction of the Democratic Party by 180 degrees. The only way to do that is to run as a Democrat. So I would strongly support everybody joining your local Democratic Party. I'm assuming that doesn't interfere with the MPD bylaws for you to be a member of both and try to take them over.
All right,
You-
that was
Okay.
excellent. We really appreciate that.
Okay.
We're gonna have to move on to Dustin, California. You can ask your question.
Yes, first of all, just a statement. I'm hearing about you for the first time. Very intrigued. I have at least 3 questions. Try to make them brief. First of all, first question, have you considered and would you run or attempt to run for a United States president?
Okay, no, I won't. My highest ambition is to be an influential member in the Democratic Party member in the House. So People's House as opposed to the Senate, which is, I think, a mistake. I think in the long run, the US Senate should be abolished. And yeah, at this point, I have no interest in running for president, but if I get to Washington, if I win in November, I will be working hard to make sure that Nancy Pelosi is no longer the House Minority Leader.
And question 2 is, what is your position and opinion about this country's current standing as far as the regional alliances with NATO? And do you think that it would be beneficial if we were to side more with like China, Russia, the DPRK, and others, and stop going pro-NATO, especially with Israel? 3, what is your position? And what do you suggest we do in terms of the so-called looming possible war on Taiwan between China and the US? And what is are we really at risk if the draft could happen, and could that trigger off
Are we
a
really
total
what?
anger here in the US?
I'm sorry, what was the last part? Are we really what?
I'll restate again. Your position on the looming possible war with China over
Right.
Taiwan, and is it really at high risk than people realize that the draft
Oh, yeah.
could happen? And would
Okay.
that set off most of the American people to just want to do away with the government, given that we don't want to go to a war over something like that based on what the real facts are over Taiwan?
Okay, thank you. These can be quick answers. NATO, we should quit NATO. If we don't quit NATO, well, it should have been dissolved in 1991 or 1992 when the old USSR disintegrated. It's had no reason to exist since then. I've already suggested that Germany, France, and Italy, any other country should quit NATO. And so, and I think that this conflict centered around Ukraine is going to be the end of NATO as an influential force for evil in the world. I think NATO is just going to be defeated. Taiwan is an emergency. June 24th, same day as the Supreme Court decision, the US flew a spy plane over Taiwan, over the Taiwan Strait. That is China, a territorial area, airspace. We the next day, the 25th, we sent a warship into Chinese territorial waters, Taiwan Strait again. What if China had sunk the ship? You know, that legally they would have had a right to order the ship to turn around and get out. If it didn't do that, they would have had a legal right, arguably, to sink it. What would the Biden administration have done then? Started launching missiles, conventional, nuclear? I mean, a few weeks
There's no
ago,
telling.
we could have had World War III. That is an impeachable offense. To provoke China, Russia, or any other country into military action is grounds for impeachment. And one of my demands is the impeachment of President Biden for 5 different reasons, but one of them is the incident with China, and the other is allowing the United States to become officially a co-belligerent with Ukraine in a proxy war against Russia. That's an impeachable offense too.
And I guess my fourth question.
No, Dustin, we got to move on for the sake of time. I'm sorry.
Thanks, good questions.
We have Jake, Missouri. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I was wondering, I heard that you grew up as a Jewish American, and myself included, growing up as a Jewish American in the Midwest. I was just curious, since you've been getting into politics, if you've dealt with anything straight up anti-Semitic growing up. But then also I was curious about your stance with Israel and, trying to find anti-Zionist platforms to kind of to speak your mind and whatnot. If you could speak about both of those things.
Okay. In high school, I guess I was a coin collector, and there were a couple of guys who kind of had a coin dealership, and they, one of them made a kind of anti-Semitic remark. This is not a big deal. Israel, however, has been the issue probably starting around 1982, the year I moved to Kentucky. That year, Israel invaded Lebanon. Massive war crime. And I started protesting at the local Reform temple, and basically was kicked out of the Jewish community. I mean, the head of the Central Kentucky Jewish Federation at that time said, "Well, you've joined the Quaker meeting. That means you're not a Jew." All right, so my relations with them, I'm constantly asking to talk with them, to meet with them, discuss, debate. But it's been a cold shoulder pretty much since 1982.
Sorry to hear.
So Israel is in constant violation of international law since 1967, Six-Day War. Ever since then, they were required to give up those territories. In the mid-70s, an international consensus was that there should be a Palestinian state in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. And that's pretty much the consensus ever since then. And I support that solution. The other thing I say to the Jewish community is that the United States is not going to be able to protect Israel very much longer. Our empire is collapsing right now. We're not going to be able to afford to have bases all over the world, and Israel is going to be on its own. And it would be real smart for Israel to implement the two-state solution that most of the world supports now, rather than wait and have to do so under pressure from Russia and the entire Middle East.
All right, thank you for that, Jeffrey. We'll move on to our next person. Karen, Arkansas, with your question. Go ahead.
Yes. I think the easiest part of this, Jeff, is going to be you getting you winning the election. All right. The big problem is once you win it, your fight is going to be enormous because unless you have a huge support network already in the House, and I know it's awful hard to get supporters for all of the things that you dream of being implemented, or at least stating. So your position as someone that needs to talk a lot, even after your election and needing ground support, I think is going to be even a lot more challenging than actually winning the election itself.
Hope you're right.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, because I'm thinking of all the people, the freshmen that come in to the House, they're wined and dined, and they're put on different committees, and they're treated like superstars. And what they're doing is they're you to belong to the rank and file just like everyone else there. And they find themselves muffled. Look at AOC, look at some of the other progressives. They get, ridiculed, made light of, and no one listens to them. And they're even, I would say, maligned. And that's what I feel is going to be happening. So I just was wondering, what's your version of if you and when you win the election? What's going to happen after?
Well, sorry. Excuse me. I want to join the House Progressive Caucus, join the squad if they're still accepting new members, and work to change the leadership. If I don't find somebody progressive who's willing to challenge Nancy Pelosi, I'm going to run against her for House Minority Leader. I'm convinced that we're going to be in the minority after November. And I have a vision of the Democratic Party becoming a genuine, lean and mean opposition party. It never has been that. But I think the current leadership overestimates how much power the Democrats have. They really have very little. And so when they're a minority in the House and Senate, that's going to be clear that they have no power at all. And I think I can add some value by charting ways for the party to become a real opposition party. Stop trying to block third parties. That's self-defeating. It's disastrous. I want the Democratic Party to genuinely be a big tent and work with. So, for example, if there's some district where where there's no good Democrat, and the best candidate is a third party person, the Democratic Party ought to support those people instead of suing to get them off the ballot.
All right. Thank you for that, Jeffrey. Moving on to the next person, Anthony, New York. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you. Sorry. First off, I want to thank you for coming on the call tonight and answering our questions. And taking time out of your day to do so. I find it interesting that, well, maybe not that interesting in the end, I guess, but that there was an article about your campaign on, I guess it was Kentucky's NPR outlet, WFPL, I believe that's what it was, 89.3. And they had quotes from the governor who was maligning your campaign and mentioned that the state Democratic Party would refuse to support or endorse your campaign. And I find it very interesting that they would rather, I guess, the far right Andy Barr win than a Democrat that they don't like. And so I guess my question was, what was your reaction to that news?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll just let you answer that. Thank you again.
Yeah, well, for weeks, I kept calling the KDP headquarters in Frankfurt, saying, I'd like to speak to the chairperson. I happen to know him, he's a nice guy, but I would never get a call back. A little bit more alarming was I would call DCCC, Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in Washington, D.C., never could reach a person, never got a call back. So, for a while I was attacking Democratic Governor Andy Beshear, saying, yeah, I'm running against two Andys this year. One's a Democrat. But it became clear that I was never going to get a call back. And so
Yeah.
I'm trying to work with as many people as possible, and that includes the entire left, everybody in America who's left of Hillary Clinton, and the Libertarian Party. Always had a good relationship with them. And even some members of the Tea Party who really don't like Mitch McConnell. So yeah, I'm just trying to get support from the entire population, independents, and build a big coalition.
And just one really quick follow-up from that.
Mhm.
Do you think that their lack of supporting you is due to either your stance on Ukraine, which I happen to agree with on you, or the fact that they think that, well, it's a solid red district, we don't stand a chance of winning, so why waste time?
No, they really hate being sued. I sued them several times. They hate that. So, I'm like, I'm the worst thing ever for the Kentucky Democratic establishment. They would much rather have a far right-wing Republican that they can use as a punching bag in 2024 than to have somebody like me in there. They can't control me. I don't owe them anything.
All right, that's excellent. Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm going to go and ask a few of the questions that I had written down. So you have a really unique position, which is abolishing the CIA. Can you tell us more about it? What led you to having that as a campaign, part of your campaign platform, let's say?
Okay. Well, since 1947, when the CIA was established, it has been the worst terrorist organization in the world. Biggest, most well-funded, most muscle behind it. From the very beginning, they worked with organized crime to smuggle addictive drugs. They assassinated John F. Kennedy, or were intimately involved in that conspiracy. They've overthrown illegally, of course, dozens of countries, dozens of governments. They've been, okay, and their intelligence has gotten worse and worse. I think, I don't know, let's see, whenever Bush the first, George Herbert Walker Bush was vice president, then later president, he politicized the intelligence side of it. So you've got an organization that commits terrorism all over the place with part of their organization, and the other side produces bad intelligence. So the worst thing they've done, I mean, worse than torture, worse than everything I've said, has been to control the American mass media, completely contrary to their charter. It's an Operation Mockingbird. It's reached a point where today it's not a question of improper influence of CIA people feeding somebody a story, a reporter. Today, the CIA is the mainstream media. They just came in and occupied it. They own the Wall Street Journal. They have editorial control. And you see all these so-called ex-CIA officers on TV constantly giving their expert opinion about world affairs. Well, that's it's outrageous. The entire mainstream media have been taken over by neocons and the intelligence community. So they've got to go. We've got 16 other intelligence agencies. Let's save some money and get rid of the worst one.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent idea. And it's a great idea that you put it as part of your platform. I think it's going to resonate a lot with Kentuckians because, as you know, Kentuckians don't have the slightest bit of trust for DC and the government. So I think that's really going to help you, especially against Andy Barr, a career politician who doesn't represent the people of Kentucky, only represents the billionaire interests that back him and the party.
Exactly right. Yep.
All right. Another question I had, tell us a little bit about the corruption, specifically in the local governments of Kentucky. You know, you were talking about how you probably couldn't find a single judge, you know, who's honorable, you know, in the Kentucky judicial system. But could you give us some more examples, please? Because Kentucky is rife with corruption.
Yeah, I think the judicial branch is the worst. I think the executive branch is probably the least corrupt. There's an executive branch ethics commission, and the legislative branch is in between. So let me see how I can, I'll just take a typical lawsuit. We have a ballot challenge law. Well, just a typical law. Okay, I sued a whole bunch of Democrats in 2019. A lot of party leaders and Andy Beshear, the current governor, his father, the former governor. And I said, all right, here are all the laws they've broken. You can't rig a primary. They did it repeatedly. You know, they got the Kentucky Educational Television, KET, involved in the conspiracy. They refused to let me debate. They had a debate between the three other candidates for governor in 2019. So I had an extremely strong case. It goes to court and all of the defendants immediately file motions to dismiss, and most of them filed motions for sanctions under Civil Rule 11 against me just for daring to file a lawsuit, suing the wrong people, I guess. And the judge instantly granted all of their motions. One motion hour, I had filed like 5 motions to vacate previous dismissal orders. And the judge dismissed all 5 of them at once in about 2 seconds. And the Court of Appeals, they just said, oh, well, the judge dismissed these allegations against all the defendants. And that's all they said. They didn't say, well, was that proper or not? Was that a valid decision? They just said, oh, the judge dismissed them. So we agree. That's real corruption. I mean, that's a travesty of justice, and it happened over and over again. I can't, it's just something like 8 lawsuits from 2015 till today. And one of them against a single judge is still before the US Supreme Court. Right now, they're deciding whether to grant certiorari or not. You can find it on the docket of the US Supreme Court by searching on Jeffrey M. Young.
All
That's
right.
corruption.
Thank you.
I mean, corruption can kill a state or a country.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And MPD stands for the people having power, and not, the corrupt billionaire interests that are currently in control. One more question before we move on, to maybe take some more questions. It says in your platform that you're for the legalization of marijuana and you're for the end of the war on drugs. So more specifically, I want to say prohibition didn't work in the 30s against alcohol. So why do your corrupt opponents like Andy Barr think that prohibition is going to continue to work in Kentucky when the majority of the country is already moving away from that, at least in terms of legalizing marijuana?
Well, I think the origin of the war on drugs answers that question. As far as I know, what happened during the Nixon administration, the anti-war movement to end the Vietnam War was really strong. Movement for civil rights, Black Power were really strong. And internal communications in the Oval Office that have been made public, it revealed that Nixon was interested in killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Who are our enemies? The hippies, anti-war people, and Blacks. And so the war on drugs, and so by making these huge penalties for possession of marijuana and all these other drugs, was at root political strategy against the anti-war movement and a racist strategy against people of color. I don't think much has changed since Nixon. So on my website, I cite a video done by John Oliver in March of this year, harm reduction. I think we should legalize all drugs. Keep the laws against driving under the influence and, running over people. But legalize all drugs like Portugal has done, and treat it as a addiction treatment problem rather than a jail problem.
Excellent. Yeah. Very few politicians running in either party will actually, hold this position that you have, but it's the correct position and it's the right position for the American people. Now we can go on to, well, it's already 8 o'clock now. So Karen, do we need to wrap things up immediately or do we still have a bit more time?
You're muted.
You're muted, Karen. We can't hear you.
Sorry, is this better? Sorry about that.
Yes,
better.
yes, that's
Yeah.
better. Thank you.
Yeah, no, we have some more time. And I would like to see those that have not spoken get a chance to speak first. And Geoff, if you need a glass of water or something, I mean, you've been talking for a whole hour. I don't know if you
I
need-
got something in my throat that's gone.
Oh, okay.
I'm fine.
All right, fine. Yeah, I would like to reach out that and then to just give Geoff a few minutes to wrap things up. And then same with Dr. Angelo and myself. Okay, so it looks like we have only 3 more hands. If you're going to wish to speak to Geoff, please raise your hand now so we can monitor it, make sure everybody gets a chance. Okay.
All right. Excellent. Naveen, we'll go to you first.
Hello, Geoff. This is the first time I've also heard about your campaign here, and I just wanted to get your perspective on the U.S.'s allies in the region of the Middle East. So, as you probably already know, Israel and Saudi Arabia are both responsible for murdering journalists. In the case of Israel, Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a Palestinian American journalist for Al Jazeera. In the case of Saudi Arabia, it was Jamal Khashoggi, who was a Washington Post journalist. And the question that I have is, what is your plan to work towards dismantling these relationships that the U.S. has in the Middle East with just human rights abusers such as the state of Israel and Saudi Arabia and the UAE with what they're doing in Yemen?
Right. Okay, so Yemen is what I was going to talk about. I think that's by far the worst war crime going on right now. From 2015 till today, 7 years. And in my list of reasons to impeach President Biden, that's one of them. Failing to stop all military cooperation with the Saudi regime. That's so important that it warrants impeaching the president, no matter who he or she is. The other 2 that I haven't mentioned yet tonight are getting our troops out of Iraq and getting them out of Syria. We're illegally occupying parts of both countries. That's an ongoing war crime, the crime of aggression. And all of these are grounds for impeachment. And the next president, presumably Kamala Harris, she doesn't act to meet these 5 impeachable offenses, she'll be next. Israel, we need to talk with Israel because their habit of bombing Syria, totally illegal, creates tremendous ill will in the region against them and against the United States. And Israel is not going to have us to protect them for long.
All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Young. We're going to move on to Remy, New York. Go ahead with your question.
Given your stance on the abolition of the CIA, is it safe to say you are also in the support of abolishing government agencies that are newer, like ICE, NSA, TSA, etc.? If so, expand on that. And also, what CIA operation do you find to be the most rapacious or egregious or just interesting? Thank you.
Okay. NED, which is just a subsidiary of the CIA now, that should go as soon as possible. I'm looking closely at the NSA. It's a joke in Washington. Used to be a joke. NSA stands for no such agency. So secret that nobody knew they existed. So they need to come under scrutiny for spying on everyone in the world, shredding the Fourth Amendment of, you need to have a warrant before you can rifle through somebody's private life. Other agencies, I'm sure, yeah, I don't know. FBI, need to look closely at them. They assassinated the best politician in my lifetime, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., 1968. And that was found to be the case in a civil trial. A jury said that the US government was involved in that assassination. So there are a lot of agencies that do a lot of bad things. Those are the ones that come to mind first. Let's see, you had another question in there, or was that, did I cover it yet?
Yeah, you encompassed it with the.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good question.
Excellent. Thank you for that response, Mr. Young. We're going to move on to Robert Hernandez from California. Go ahead with your question.
Well, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to be with us today. And what is the situation with ICE in Kentucky?
I don't know that much about it. I hear about them on the borders. I think they do their normal thing. They'll occasionally raid some business and deport all the undocumented workers. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. We have a lot of immigrants in Kentucky, a lot of them from Africa, which is interesting, and certainly a lot from Latin America.
Absolutely. We'll move on to Nick A. from Minnesota. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you for coming on for this webinar tonight and talk with us tonight. I was looking over your website a bit. I was wondering, considering how the sorry state of US infrastructure is with many major roads and other things being rated D- or worse, what is your plan for improving infrastructure and perhaps expanding public transportation in the United States? And as my own personal little question, do you have any support for like high-speed rail or some other kind of mass transit? Thank you.
Okay. So I would have voted for the Build Back Better legislation, which actually passed the House, died in the Senate. I would have supported that. I reviewed the bill and it seemed fine. So things like that, but the Republicans always bring up the question, how are you going to pay for all these things? Well, the answer is cut the military budget by 70%, cut the number of troops by 70%, close all our foreign bases, bring all our troops home, and basically put the military industrial complex out of business. That will free up a tremendous amount of public money that can be used to build high-speed rail. China has proven that it's a good strategy for economic development. The other way to make reduce the budget deficit is to tax the rich. I'm seriously thinking about a wealth tax so that nobody owns, nobody's net assets on December 31st of any year are higher than, $500 million. I think, somebody can live on that for a long time, the rest of their natural life. with 500 million, I'm sorry, 500 million in assets. And go back to a progressive income tax, which we had in the 1950s, 60s, and it gradually got less and less progressive, basically tax the rich and cut the military, cut the war budget by 70%. We can do a whole lot of things to improve our infrastructure, bring jobs back here, on and on.
Yeah, that sounds like an excellent strategy and plan you got there. We're going to move on to Tim, New Jersey. Go ahead with your question.
First, thank you for coming on with us today. And then I'd like to ask, what is your position towards labor unions? And then also, would you support the repeal of the Taft-Hartley Act?
Yeah, I will support that. Labor unions have been attacked systematically for the last 100 years or more. And so our retiring U.S. representative from Louisville, Jefferson County, John Yarmouth, is very good on labor issues. I want to be at least as good as he was, and strongly support unions whenever possible. You just throw in there, support cooperatives too. So if there's a question of should a bank get a government contract or a credit union, or get some kind of favorable treatment, I will always favor the credit union.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you for that, Jeffrey.
If we were to have a Labor Party form in the US, I think that would be a great thing, a wonderful thing. Like, a lot of countries have labor parties.
All right. We're going to move on to the next person, Andrew B., Michigan. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, Jeff. So I just had two questions. My first one is, what is your stance on a switch to renewable energy, and how would you carry that out? Particularly, what is your stance on nuclear energy? And my other question goes back to something you said earlier about the Senate, how you mentioned that you would like to eventually abolish the Senate, or you see that as something that should be done. My second question is, why do you think the Senate tends to keep out progressives more effectively than the House, which I assume is part of the reason why you think it should be abolished? Thank you.
Okay. My job for, oops, I'm frozen here. My job for, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. 15 years in Frankfurt was in the state energy office. The mission of that agency was and is to promote energy efficiency and renewable energy. I strongly support that. And I've worked with the U.S. Department of Energy to do that in Kentucky for about 13 years. I know what works and what doesn't. Strong support. I've been an environmentalist all my life too. I think the EPA is the best agency in the federal government, the most cost-effective, has the most societally beneficial effects of any other agency. Okay, and nuclear power. I've had a change in my thinking on that within the last 2 years. I read a lot of Amory Lovins 40 years ago, guru of energy efficiency. I never thought nuclear power was a good idea, mainly because it leads to weapons proliferation. A couple of years ago, though, I read a couple of books by an author named Dmitry Orlov. I think he's living in St. Petersburg now, Russia. And I concluded a couple things. One, peak oil is happening. If that happens, we're going to need something. It will be just a sheer necessity. So, and the other is some of these accidents might not have been entirely accidental. Chernobyl, Fukushima might not have been quite accidents. So I've changed my position on nuclear power. I think we'll be forced to do it, but it has to be done safely, and maybe we'll all be using Russian nuclear power plant designs 20 years from now.
All right, we now are running out of time. I'm sorry, Clark, we're going to have to cut it off. Dustin, you have the last question. Just make it one question, okay? Because then we want to round it up. All right, go ahead.
First of all, do you have any support coming out of currently Orange County, Southern California at this point? If not, or if so, what might I do to help you out?
Well, okay, I might, but the Act Blue reports give an address, but I don't know which county it is. Anyway, yeah, I've gotten some contributions from Southern California, but what would help would be to set up a meeting, well, it could be Zoom, it could be everybody at your residence, and do this. I mean, have them ask questions and meet any concerns they might have. I mean, if they like Adam Schiff, they're not going to like me. Right?
Right.
But yeah, if you were to set something up, that would be wonderful.
All right.
Comrade Karen, would you like to help with that later?
Well, I'm getting on that. You did a good segue on what I was going to say. So, yeah, we are we're a national organization, and we do have chapters around the country. I was going to ask if Alex, our chair for the MPD chapter for Kentucky, Ohio, would mind being a coordinator, so that if you need help, I'm thinking like even phone banks, anything like that, or as you say, offering other chances to speak, that we coordinate it through Alex, because you could have a national organization behind you if you feel that this is a good fit.
Oh, it's a fantastic fit. I looked at the MPD platform this afternoon. It's wonderful.
Wonderful to be, we're trying to get, like Dr. Angelo always tells us, we have to be at the table.
Yes.
And this is perfect.
And 100 other organizations.
All right.
The Democratic Party cannot survive if it stays insular and isolationist. That's crazy.
Yeah, I'd agree. And Alex, I'm giving you a chance to say anything before Dr. Angelo wraps it up.
I just want to say thank you, Jeffrey, for being here and taking the time out of your day to answer our enthusiastic questions. We're really excited about this campaign. This is a one-of-a-kind deal, and I'm really looking forward to doing work with you in the future, whether that be boots on the ground, work on the internet, maybe coordinating with national MPD and other chapters. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I thank you. I thank you for being here.
Well, thank you too, and I'm excited.
Good.
All right.
All right. Dr. Angelo, did you want to say anything before we leave?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that this was a breath of fresh air, to be totally honest with you. We tried years ago. I was involved with the Reform Democratic Movement in New York City. So we did try to do what you mentioned, and we succeeded. However, and there's a big however, many times we won, and then we sat on our laurels after we took over the local Democratic Party.
Oh,
And what happened is that we became the new Democratic Party. I saw that happen in Staten Island, Richmond County, where I live, and that sort of soured me on that. We came out of the movement for Kennedy's brother. I forgot his name now. The one who was Robert. Yes,
Robert,
yeah, Bobby, yeah. And I saw good people come into that, and I saw them turn bad after 10, 20, 30 years. Weird, very strange. So my question to you is the issue of cutting the military budget. We tried that also. In the year 1980s, we talked about a program called Take the Money from the Military Budget and Use it for social services. That we had that throughout the country, and that's the way to go. And I find that there's no consistency, unfortunately, with people pushing these things. They sort of get tired and they die out. And we need to have consistency. We need to and then eventually we'll get it through. I myself will go to your website and give $200 to your campaign. That's how excited I am. I hope others are. I think people like you are needed. You had the word when you said we need a Labor Party. That's exactly what we need in this country. We're the only industrialized country that doesn't have a Labor Party. Even if it becomes social democratic, it is still ahead of the game compared to what we have now for the elections in this country. I think we need something called proportional representation, which we don't have in this country, which we did have in New York City, in the city council in the 1930s and 40s. We had proportional representation, and it was very effective for progressive candidates. So everything you're saying needs to be said, and I worry about you that you don't get tired of fighting because it's so easy to lose spirit. But you got to keep on, and there are people behind you, as I said. MPD, I will push for the MPD in New York chapter to be working and be in contact with you. The elections will come and go, but your existence and your relationship with the MPD should continue.
Yes.
That sounds great. I agree.
Yes. Yeah. That's as I was going to say too. It's not just one thing that's happening, i.e., the election. It's what happens after that. So we're in for the long term, and the fact that you spent so many years doing the lawsuits tells me that you're in for the long term too.
Yeah, 10 years.
Oh, gee. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Geoff, expect to be contacted minimally by Alex, but maybe some other ones too. All right.
Yeah, right.
And
if
we'll
people didn't get to ask their question, call me up or
that's true. Well, yeah.
Can you just tell us your website, please?
Yes, Young for Kentucky, YOUNG, the number 4, KY.com.
Right. And your email is energetic22@gmail.
Energetic22@yahoo.com.
Energetic22@yahoo.com. All right. All right. Thanks again, folks. And thank you so much, Mr. Young, for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been refreshing for all of us. Thank you.
Okay.